Hello there everyone. So Total War Warhammer 3 is quite a complex game with a ton of different variables, different lords. So to assist the beginners and newer players to both Total War and Warhammer 3, and also to give a refresher to those that play on the highest difficulties, here are 5 campaign tips that you can use on any difficulty and with almost any faction. Now, a disclaimer, of course, this is my approach to the game, a sort of balanced thematic idea that I use, the old school Total War thinking. It is not intended to be a comprehensive guide, just some basic rules that I like to follow to assist my own campaigns that I wish to share with you. Without further ado, let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1, your first goal is to establish your economy. What does this mean? Well, basically to support your first full army, your first 20 stack as people say, and still have money to continue your buildings. As you can see in this example, I conquered the initial province for Reichland, and I did not skip a turn in recruitment, so I'm close to that 20 stack, while having some money to continue the buildings and growing. Perfect. Not every faction does this in the same form or manner, some achieve a level balance later on, but you should aim to get to the point where you're comfortable and thinking about getting a second army. Now, not every single faction plays the same way. Let's get another example here, for instance, with Archaon, the Ever-Chosen of the Warriors of Chaos. As you can see here, Archaon, I have a 20 stack, I built it up as quickly as I could, and I'm not earning as much money as I was in the Reichland campaign, only 900 in this case. So this will get improved because, of course, I'm building the necessary buildings to get more income, and I have my vassals as well. But you can see that it took me quite a while in terms of turns to get to this point. That is fine. Different factions and different races have a different balance in this case. So all that I want you to think about is that your stabilized economy should be the first goal, and that is when you get the money to get your first full stack, and that you can still have a little bit of money to continue building. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to not overexpand. So what we mean by this, it's very tricky. Let me talk about it. So you may see the AI get 10 plus or even 30 plus settlements while you're much smaller. That is okay. You can even set ground rules for yourself, like I want to have X provinces per every 10 turns. But the type of faction that you're playing, how aggressive, how defensive you are, if at turn 10 you had an ambush battle and it severely hindered you, that counts. So for instance, in this Kislev campaign, I was hindered a little bit. That's why I didn't expand too much. On this Siloster campaign, I'm actually doing something different. I'm sending an army, I'll speak to it about in just a few moments. I'm sending an army away to just set up some Vampire Coast pirate coves. So that's the play style. So I'm not going to plan out on expanding too much because one of my armies is not here to defend. It's just raiding and doing that sort of style. So I'm just using one army to defend the place that I have, and I'll expand as I feel comfortable. But right now I would need like a third army to defend this while I'm expanding. So that is the don't wish you to overexpand. I wish you to play in a way that you will only expand when you feel comfortable, that you can stick to what you already conquered. Tip number 3. So instead of expanding too much, focus on finishing your enemies up. Let's say that you have 2 nearby enemies or 3 nearby enemies, only one has like a settlement, conquer it, raise it, whatever. Just ensure that that faction is no more. One less enemy means one less annoying faction getting others to fight against you, bribing them, less agents, less armies overall for you to fight against, and less of a chance of them recovering. In this example, 3 factions are at war with me, including Khorne and including Cetra, but I'm nearly finished with Cetra, and I have to finish it off because likely I'm going to have a second front very soon here to the south. So finishing them off and just defending on this place while seeing the other developments makes a sound decision. Overall, checking how many settlements an enemy has and deciding where to expand based on that is always a good idea. In this Kairos campaign, I have a new enemy, this lizardman faction that is over here to the north. It may seem that I could advance and conquer them, but I have Teclis nearly finished up. It makes no sense for me to attack the lizardman now when Teclis can recover, so I'm going to finish him up and only then deal with the lizardman. Now, the biggest issue here is that I also have some enemies in other areas, but for now there seems to be no activity, so it makes perfect sense. Kairos will deal with Teclis, and then I'll deal with the lizardman once they perhaps arrive. I'll have plenty of time to do so, but sometimes it's not that clear. What is clear to me is this: the more that I spend time with Teclis alive, the more he can bring in other factions. Like you've seen there, the other lizardman faction, the Last Defenders, he has some trade deals. Maybe he can sum up some bribery and send them to attack me, and that would be a much bigger hindrance than the fact that there's already a lizardman army nearby. So overall, finish your enemies. Tip number 4 is to expand to areas that you can defend with the armies that you have currently. It will take some time before getting this, but in essence, if you have an army defending 2 settlements and you can expand in order to defend only one as like a choke point, perfect. The opposite is better to avoid unless you're aware of what you're doing. For example, this army that I'm building up here in Southernburg, it can defend nearly everything on the south of my new empire, while I can expand to the north instead. And once the north area is expanded, and I can defend near Numas, for instance, which gets a natural choke point, then perhaps I can go and conquer the south. Expanding to the south will bring up some problems. The extension of my army will be too much. It will defend one location, but it won't defend that above location near Southernburg. So suddenly, I may need a garrison there, maybe a third army. Instead, if we focus on the north, I'll realize that this is a very difficult place to invade. Why? Because it's very easy for the enemy to counterattack. It's a very wide front, open area. They can move in and attack me. So overall, what I would always do if I intend to move on this location is to have a second army on the location. Manfred can go in and someone can defend, likely near Numas, which is a very natural choke point there. In the Kairos campaign example, how many settlements can Kairos defend alone? Basically, the conquered settlements that I have here, maybe if I conquer Fortress of Dawn, and also the previous settlements that I had on the Southern Realms, that is mainly what he is defending. But of course, it will be difficult once I overextend, once I expand a little bit further. If I go against those lizardmen, then naturally he will be defending solely on this position, and you can forget about bringing him back in case there's issues on these other possible fronts. So the Fate Weaver's crevices there and the Skull Carver's abode there, I'll likely need a secondary army, so why not start building up one over here, which then brings you to the natural conclusion: I need more armies, I need more settlements, and I need them focus on income. These sort of decisions will naturally come to you as you play more often and specifically in different campaigns. Now let me go to this previous Astrogoth campaign that I was doing and give you an analysis of how things are. So basically everything on this north part has been destroyed. All that is left is my allies, so I don't have any issues on that place. It counts as if it is my own. At least I can confirm that in diplomacy. They're my allies, they're good allies, they won't betray me. So I can release those armies to go and fight Vashna's conquest there, just to ensure that nothing happens in that case and they don't get bigger, because they're terrifying. And I need to secure this empire border. I have already 2 armies to defend, but overall that northern part of the empire border is a little bit ill defended. So that's where I would send those armies. If I were to attack right now, it would be a bad option. Mainly, regardless of the fact if they have any armies located there or not, I would be better off waiting for some reinforcements into Hawkland so that I can be sure that I won't have any surprises later on. That's at least how I want you to think about expansion in the late game. Tip number 5, one of the most important ones: scout. Use your heroes. Having even one hero moving ahead is so important. It will ensure that you are aware of any armies coming in for you, the location of where they are defending. For example, here I've figured out all of the information that I wanted from these armies from the vampire accounts just by having a couple of heroes nearby, just checking all the time for their location. And that's what made me decide to attack on this end, because they were unprepared for that. It was the best way to attack that end game crisis. Instead, coming in with a brute force from the north, it wouldn't have been the best case scenario, so that's why I used that. Those two heroes saved me up a potential issue with a lot of enemy ambushes and such, and I used the same principle here on the north. I sent out a hero just to check if they had any forces, any surprises there, and then I sent out the reinforcements. So that's the sort of idea that I want you to have. Now here's a different example. Let me showcase what not to do. This is a very early part of the game. I don't really need to know what's going on all across the world, but still what I've done here that I wouldn't recommend is to send out a hero way too far away. So I'm at war here with the Azazel and with some Norscan factions, the Sarl, and of course I would need some assistance, checking in how many armies are coming in so that I can prepare. That would be the best course scenario. I should send a hero to that area just to see if Tsarina needs some reinforcements, if I need to recruit better units, or if I can go with this, if I need a second army. But where do I have my hero? I send it out on an expedition. So this is not what I would advise in terms of scouting. Basically, of course, if you have a plan for these sort of situations where you want to talk to plenty of other factions, you want to meet them early on so that you can discuss, trade, whatever, that's good. But most of the time what will happen is that you'll discover enemy forces, they will declare earlier, they'll become aware of you earlier, and then they'll start declaring wars. You're going to have to face them in diplomacy. So whenever you can delay meeting enemy factions because they are in the fog of war, then the better. That's the sort of idea that I want you to have. Scout the nearby enemies. No need to know how Nakari is going when he's so far away, at least not until you're ready to go against it. So keep your scouting to your needs, your immediate needs, the immediate enemies or potential enemies, and that will be better for you overall. And how do you scout, for instance, in these sort of situations where you are already close to an enemy, and why should you scout? In this case, what I'm doing is trying to see if there's any enemy armies nearby. I already see that there's one there over in Steingart, but what if there was a third one nearby? So overall, you should scout when you are attacking to ensure that that is the correct decision. And in this case, I already know that there's an enemy army coming in. I'm going to set myself up in ambush, and overall, just to ensure that I can defeat that army, that I can ambush it, that I can force them into a worse position so that I don't have any problems later on. Overall, ensure that you use those heroes that are active with them, spotting for enemy armies, and then going back to your army whenever you need them to attack. Using that Archeon campaign, now I have yet another example. This is not in the case of having used this hero or not. This is a case of not even having recruited, not even having paid attention. So diplomatically, Boris will always go to war against us, and I failed completely at reinforcing this ground. I just went against all these tips that I've been doing. I went to the south. I didn't made up a second army. I didn't scout for enemy potential issues. And overall, this is the area where I should defend, maybe on Uxkulak there. I don't know how to pronounce that place, but still, that would be a good place to defend, and then I would deal with Boris. I should have paid attention to diplomacy, and also, all that I needed was actually to just recruit a hero and spot what was here in the fog of war. I would have realized that Boris was about to conquer their initial enemy, and then it will likely go against me. So that is the sort of idea that I want you to have. Combining all those tips really defines how you can go and move in without having these sort of bad decisions as I've made here. Of course, I can perhaps remedy this. I can have some good defenses. I can recruit an army here or so. But if you consider that, well, I could have just recruited a hero and spotted this all the time, and it would be a much better outcome. So scouting, guys, use your heroes. You can even use some lords if you don't have access to heroes, if you don't need those lords. By all means, it is always important to have some information about the enemy. So to resume, first goal, to establish your economy. Tip number 2, do not overexpand. Tip number 3, focus on finishing up your foes. Tip number 4, expand where you can defend. Look for those natural choke points. And tip number 5, one of the most important ones, scout. That one is useful in every single difficulty, no matter if you already play on Legendary. For sure, you've had those campaigns where it all went sour and you thought, I could have done this better. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll be sure to come back with some more tips. Have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.